Awesome. Welcome back to Matthew's Blueprint for Britain. Tonight, I have got a really great guest. We've been talking for years and been in different group chats and stuff like that, but we've never actually managed to sit down and have a proper conversation. Well, tonight, we changed that. I am joined by Joseph Robertson. We are going to have a great blast tonight talking about all the things that matter. How are you, Joseph? How's everything going?
Very good, mate. Good to finally be on with you. Yeah, looking forward to this
It's
one.
honestly, we've never managed to finally get a sit down. We've crossed paths many times on different groups. So I'm grateful for you to come on and give us a chance. I also notice you remembered your poppy. I remembered mine. Congratulations to you. You
Yeah.
could be Deputy Prime Minister of this country, I think.
Well, it's a low bar, isn't it? I mean, as long as I can actually, pass a few conversations without lying through my teeth, I think that would be a good qualification.
Well, let's see how we get on today. I mean, I wanted to go one better than him. I dug out from my cupboard my old Poppy shirt from when I did the Poppy run years ago. So I'll wear that some point this weekend and make sure I tag
Excellent.
David Lammy in it. But look, right, let's dive straight into this. What a week. We've had 2 prison escapees this week. It comes just days after Hadish Kabatu escaped from prison, the Epping Bell migrant sex offender. I mean, what the hell is going on? Ironically, it's David Whammy again who's in charge of the justice system in this country. I mean, Joseph, like, what do we do? Why are prisoners out on the street?
Yeah, well, someone said on X that it was the Mr. Bean show. Watching this guy running around London trying to basically get himself deported. He couldn't figure out how to do it. I mean, it was just amazing. I feel awful laughing about this story because at the end of the day, there is a victim and a very real crime involved in this. But the whole thing is just a beautiful parable for the state of affairs we find ourselves in.
Yeah.
And yeah, 2 in 1 week. I mean, look, the reality is, in my opinion, there are probably far more that we don't know about. I remember a story not too long ago, it was only a few months ago, where they found a whole load of people working at I think it was a solar farm or something like that.
Did they? I hadn't heard of that. What?
It was some kind of energy plant that they had. I won't try and remember exactly what the story was, but there was about 6 or 7 illegal migrants working there, being paid completely off the grid. And I mean, I don't know if these guys had been released or escaped or they just come straight over on the boats, but there are so many people walking on our streets that we have no idea about. They're completely undocumented. I mean, these are high profile cases purely because they're embarrassed, right? Both of them, well, at least the first one was already deported. And I think they're going to try and do the same thing with the second one. And what that really shows is that the state can move to act when it wants. It can deport someone overnight when it wants, but only when it's embarrassed enough to do so. So, for the others, I'm sure they'll have claimed that maybe they're allergic to chicken nuggets in Sudan and therefore they cannot, under any circumstances, be deported.
Joseph,
in the right sector.
There's no need to worry. David Lammy's in charge. He's going to sort it all out. I mean, there's no need to worry at all.
I don't know if you ever watched Dead Ringers, but I was hear the David Lammy internal monologue that they do very well on there, which is always sort of Lammy trying to figure out if he's going to Lammy up in the next few minutes. So, Lammy, don't do it, Lammy. And I do feel like when I'm watching him in Parliament, it's kind of that going on. It's sort of 2 brains working against each other, but there's only 1 cell in each, unfortunately, which is the major problem.
Well, yeah. Wasn't it Lee Anderson said, if you take the village idiot from every village in this country and put them all in Tottenham, David Lammy would still be the village idiot. I mean, he doesn't do himself any favours. There's, we saw his mastermind.
I'm a Spurs fan, so I can say, with full confidence that that's. I don't know, actually, might have some competition, but yeah, no.
Well, the problem is he doesn't do himself any favors, right? We've seen, there was that case where he said, "I've not seen any police since I got here," and there's a police officer over his shoulder. There's, him as a deputy prime minister, forgetting the poppy, and then having to have that poppy handed to him. We saw his mastermind appearance. I mean, absolutely, this guy, he is, on the ball when it comes to knowing who succeeded Henry VIII, and clearly Henry. I mean, it's just. Do you think they're actually going to sort this problem out, though? Because I think you've touched on something really important here. These are just the cases we know about. There was something like 4 or 5 people being accidentally let out. I think it was every week. These are the only ones we know of right now. Do you think this is just the tip of the iceberg? We're now suddenly going to get this stream of not only Labour letting prisoners out early, but they're letting them out by mistake as well.
Well, fundamentally, what we always find is that it doesn't really matter what the topic is, whether it's immigration, economy, net zero, whatever it is. The numbers are always about a quarter to a half of what they really are. They never tell you how bad it is. The economy, in my opinion, is more than double what they say. Illegal immigration, certainly the same. The reality is that we are lied to by official bodies on these statistics because it's expedient to do so. And we only really get a glimpse of how bad it is when something awful happens.
Yeah.
And that's a very sad state of affairs. But, you're absolutely right. There is a huge problem with underreporting. It is a real shame, to be honest, that we have to wait for it to get that far before we can talk about it.
Well, on a cheerier note, I hear the economy's working wonders because Rachel Reeves, obviously we saw her speech earlier in the week, setting the tone for the budget. And it was almost like the £22 billion black hole that she made up last year. She couldn't prove any evidence that it actually exists. And now it's apparently a 40 billion black hole. I mean, is she the only chancellor to have ever come into post and made things twice as bad and still blames everything else?
Well, we know for a fact that she's not really the one putting the figures together. They've been quite clear about who's behind the budget. So she doesn't really understand the numbers. And that's not an excuse for how bad it's been. It's quite shocking, really, when you see the amount of different areas there are to go into. We could talk about the gilt market crash that's about to happen.
Yep.
The bond
Rachel
market
Reeves
doing
just
terribly.
crashed the economy, as was going round on Twitter throughout the week.
Well, I was at the speech that Richard Tice gave at Bloomberg the other day. And it was quite interesting to watch the reaction in the room to his puns about Rachel Reeves. And I mean, you had a pretty city crowd there, not necessarily all pro-reform, but they certainly laughed along to his jokes, particularly on the topic of Rachel Reeves. And I think that's the feel across the financial community, right? It doesn't really matter what you believe politically. You just know that she's a bit of an idiot. And the government as a whole don't really understand economics. I mean, you look across that front bench. I mean, I'm 28, I do run a company, and I've got more experience than most of the front bench of our current government. Yeah. And that's, slightly shocking. I don't think we should be in the position where I can say that at all.
It's a sorry state. It's a sorry state of affairs, certainly. I mean, I was going to touch upon that. So obviously, Rachel Reeves made her speech, and then immediately Kemi Badenoch had a speech, and then we saw Nigel have a speech, and Richard Tice, as you said, at Bloomberg. I mean, it has been very much, I don't remember seeing a budget being almost politicised and party politics and electioneering already. I mean, has the general election campaign started already, in your opinion?
Well, I think the general election campaign started on July the 5th, to be honest. I think the whole point of reform was that, this was just the beginning, and that has definitely proven to be the case. The reality is that the Tories don't have yet any kind of hope of resurrecting themselves from where they've fallen to. And I don't know if they can, to be honest, within the space of time they've got. So really, it's reform versus Labour. So that battle started on July the 5th.
That's a very easy decision as far as I'm concerned. I think that's a very easy decision for 99% of the country, but somehow Labour still end up in about 15 or 17% in any poll. I mean, who even are these people? But who do you think won the narrative of the budget this week? Was it Kemi, reform with Nigel and Richard, or did Rachel from accounts pull a blinder?
So I think actually the only criticism I really saw of the reform position was from the Conservatives, ironically, because they're obviously trying to claim back the narrative that they're the party of common sense. But I mean, no one really cares. I mean, this is the problem. You only have two figures that are genuinely being talked about. Starmer because he's so hated and Nigel because he's so loved, typically speaking. And of course, there are plenty of people who might disagree with those positions, but they won't do it too loudly at this point because there's no other show in town. So really reform wins out, whether it's good or bad press. All press is good press at this point for them because they're the party being talked about. And it's the same thing for Starmer. A lot of people don't understand this, but the back room of politics, what you're really trying to do is make sure that your opponents don't get into the narrative. So, my personal opinion, and it's the opinion of many other people, Angela Rayner took the chop purely to steal Nigel's thunder at Reform Party conference. We saw it happen almost in real time while I was there. And of course, he managed to reclaim the narrative and turn it around. And, this is the back and forth that we see going on. It doesn't really matter for Labour if it gets any worse because, they're right at rock bottom. So, throw another minister to another scandal, talk about
Well, we tried,
I think this was a leak. I think this was an intentional leak. Our taxes are going up now. That's all that people are going to talk about. They're not going to focus as much on what Richard said at
Well,
Bloomberg.
I mean, Labour are trying to throw scandal after scandal. We've seen everything with Rachel Reeves's, house and the licenses she did or didn't get. And, do you think this budget, is anyone's heads going to roll over this? I mean, they're baking it in at the moment. Taxes are going to go up. We've got no choices. Life's really difficult, blah, 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 blah. I mean, we're going to get to the end of November. They're going to do the budget. It's going to be a disaster for everybody. And that'll be it, won't it? We'll just have to suck up and put up with it.
Well, it was quite, it's quite disgraceful. I saw an article from, I think it was Paul Goodman in the Critic, talking about how Liz Truss was the source of all our economic woes that we see today. And I was just thinking, Liz had some pretty sensible policies. The position that she found herself in, even when she left office, was nowhere near what we're seeing today. And yet, the Bank of England essentially took a gun to her head.
Of course.
So
Well,
where's
the irony is, we
same
talked about the
outrage for
gilt
Rachel
market
Reeves?
tanking earlier. They tanked by £22 billion. It was so ironic. Labour talked about this £22 billion black hole. Well, there it is. You've caused it.
There's a false paradigm of ideological economics. Economics don't love you based on whether or not you're red or blue. They will happen based on markets, because hard-headed people with cash in their pockets are trying to make big decisions. And so the real test of any government is the economy, not because they're necessarily right or wrong, but because you understand how much credibility you have as a government based on how much you can control the markets. And the problem is for this government that while their mates are basically propping them up, we can all see that the emperor's wearing no clothes. And, the reality is...
Even though Lord Ali's bought them for them.
Well, quite. I mean, he might have taken them off as well, but I couldn't possibly comment.
Well, he won't be able to afford it after November, given all these tax rises that are coming in. There might be an Ali tax or something. I don't know.
Well, it's just going to lead to more brain drain. People are going to be leaving. Yeah. That's the reality of it. They're already leaving. I go around Mayfair. I talk to investors quite a lot. I see people in the city quite a lot. A lot of these buildings I'm walking past and going into are empty. It's just a catastrophic level of decline. There's a lack of good businesses staying in town, certainly a lack of donors, funders, people who prop up the projects that we need to exist in this country. And even banks, I think, at this point are beginning to worry about the climate, because where are they going to see any boost in the economy? How can they lend? How can they see growth? We're getting onto a very, very, very dangerous cliff edge at the moment.
Well, you mentioned about Labour MPs looking after their mates. I'm going to make a little segue here. Are you talking about the Fabians, Joseph? Is that what you're talking about?
Thanks for bringing up my favourite topic. Yeah, of course I am. I mean, just look at the positions these people are in. You've got Lord Hermer, you've got Sadiq Khan, you've got Keir Starmer
my
himself.
Good friend, I love him.
Yeah, of course. Well, you know all about London. And you've got Andrew Bailey. I mean, look, how can you have someone running the Bank of England, supposedly a absolutely aloof, independent institution, who is openly a member of the Fabian Society? And then you read the principles of the Fabian Society 140 years ago, and those principles were to bring communism through gradualism. That's what they preach. It's socialism disguised, a wolf in sheep's clothing, as their original logo was. These people are everywhere. They're embedded. I'm glad this story is blown up, because it goes from the realm of conspiracy into the realm of realism, right? Which is just that.
I was going to pick you up on that. There are going to be a lot of people who this is the first time they've ever heard about the Fabians. This is the first time they've even, they're going to go, typical far-right nutters, the lot of us talking about the Fabian Society, whoever these people are. Do you want to just debunk it and prove and show people how embedded and how interlinked? I mean, you've already rattled off, Lord Hermer, Sadiq Khan, Andrew Bailey. These are people who have the levers of power in the United Kingdom
Tony
right
Blair.
now.
Let's add another name that people might know to the mix.
Everyone's a good friend.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, Tony. If only Tony was back, everything would be better. But no, I mean, the problem with all of these people is that they are explicit in their ideology. So it's I don't know, for my more sophisticated viewers, maybe they've heard of the letter on the mantelpiece, which is the purloined letter, the Edgar Allan Poe analogy, which is basically you want to hide something, you put it in plain sight on the mantelpiece and no one can ever find it because they're looking everywhere in all the nooks and crannies. right? And this is exactly what the Fabian Society is. I mean, I love it when the left come after us and say we all live in Tufton Street and we're funded by Russian oligarchs and all the rest of it. You know, I'd love to have seen some of that money while I was in my
Yeah,
think tank
where's my
days.
paycheck? I mean,
I certainly
genuinely,
didn't
that
get enough
that would be
invites to
lovely
Tufton
right now.
Street. Yeah, it's rather sad to see. But no, this is a genuine organization with serious clout. It's got, you know, huge organization up and down the country. There are local chapters everywhere. Now, people's accusation is always, oh, it's just a think tank. You know, they just get together and they play cards. You know, I basically call it the Masons for losers. You know, I think that's a good analogy, because it's basically like you go and you sit together, and instead of thinking about how you get on in your career, you're basically going and sitting together and talking about how to destroy society. And you just have to read some of their pamphlets over the years. It doesn't really mean a great deal to people until they've actually read what these people believe. Go and look at what the original founders, the Webbs and Shaws, were doing back in particularly the 20s, 30s, and 40s, because you'll find they had some very interesting friends, such as Mussolini and Stalin, who they loved and adored. And they,
Invited
you know,
normally to everyone's dinner party, I find, those people.
Exactly. So, yeah. So these guys, the origins of this philosophy, the origins of this idea of gradualism, which is a slow creep through the institutions. I mean, we can see it everywhere, right? You know, the slow march through the institutions. We've heard that so often now. Well, why is that? You know, I mean, well, and then you find out what the Fabians did. They created the London School of Economics. They created the Labour Party. They were actually the original founders, people within the same movement, writing the same pamphlets, the same tracts, the same philosophy. It's not a conspiracy. It's just literally the ideology behind the party we see today. And Blair was the biggest proponent of this, you know, and him moving forward the conversation so much is why we're here today. The last 28 years have been a massive revolution constitution.
It's so depressing to see the state of the UK. I mean, you know, this is Matthew's blueprint for Britain. We're trying to fix things. Like, how do we solve this? Do we just call out the Fabians? Do we call out the David Whammies of society who let prisoners out early? Do we call out lying, corrupt politicians who say they won't increase taxes and then go and do it for everyone apart from their mates? I mean, how do we fix these three things? Because these have been the headlines of the week. I mean, the Fabian Society, again, this is something which I didn't even know about until I watched the interview of you, Alex, and Stephen on Talk, exposing what the heck this was. How do we fix this? How do we solve Britain? I mean, I know that's a big question to put on your shoulders, but, you know, what's your thoughts?
I think you've got to do two things. You've got to put things back in the hands of industry, which Reform are trying to do. You know, and I give them huge props for that, because it's difficult to actually stand up as a politician and say, I want you to help us solve the problem, rather than telling people you're going to solve their problems. That's the easy way to do populism. The real way to fix this country is to ask people. Ask the remnant of the people sitting in Mayfair in the city, not because they're billionaires because they're successful people who understand how money works. Ask them what's going wrong in this country, and you'll find out the answers very, very quickly. Regardless of where they sit on the political spectrum, everyone has the same answers. The second problem we've got, and the second thing we've got to do, is when we win, if we win, we have to fix the state, because the state doesn't work for us. And that is the biggest problem. The blob, whatever you want to call it, the deep state. The reality is that Whitehall is the huge problem. It's not the elected officials. They're bad enough as it is. Even the Labour government can't get its own agenda done because of civil servants. I mean, this is the amazing
I've always said it is the civil servants who frankly run government. A minister changes left, right and centre. It's those permanent secretaries and civil servants who call the string.
Absolutely. And those who like Tony Blair perhaps ascend to another level of supranational organisation and run the Tony Blair
they get their
Institute or Open
Fabian
Society.
hat and their Fabian pin badge or something, don't they?
I mean, I wish that they were as cool and sexy as the villains that we really want to make them out to be. But the reality is they're just prattling around. So, yeah, what I would say, two things. Go out to industry, first of all. Get your ideas put together by sensible people who understand how industries work. And then when you get into power, and I think we will get into power, do something with that power. Don't be afraid to be bold in the same way Blair was. We've got to undo all of that all over again.
Yeah. No, I've always said it. And look, I you know, whilst I'm a Conservative councillor, I am absolutely in favour of a lot of things that Reform are doing. And I think they are saying what we as Conservatives, well, not me, but others, aren't willing to say. We've got to do these things. The state is not working. You can't just chuck more money at the problem. That's the
And to do it, you've got
definition
to
of
win. You know,
insanity.
this is my point. I left the Tory party because I didn't think it could win anymore. You know, that's the reality of it. I didn't join Reform just because it was the thing going. There were plenty of other parties I could have looked at and chosen. I went and joined Reform because I got a real sense that they knew how to win, and that they also had the boldness and the pissed offness to actually do it. And that's a big deal in
We should
politics.
frame that. That is a very important phrase, the pissed offness, because it is just the anger at the state of the country and the willingness and drive to want to do something about it.
Absolutely. You know, and that's the biggest driver, not just of winning an election, but also what you do when you get in. Do you have the vindictiveness to go against the state that tried to break Brexit, that tried to break Liz Truss, that tried to break Nigel on so many occasions? Well, the only man who can do that, the only man with the vindictiveness and the genuine drive and also patriotism at the same time, in my opinion, is Nigel Farage. And I think that's why he will win.
No, I very, very commonly, I'm finding myself agreeing entirely with a lot of what Reform says, and I completely agree with you. Look, Joseph, thank you so much. It's wonderful to have you on. Where can people find you? Where can people follow you for more?
So I tweet at JR Types, and I've got a Substack by the same name, and you can find me on Instagram at Joseph Robertson UK. Yeah, and if you like what I do, feel free to follow.
We got a TikTok. Is there a TikTok coming?
You know what? I did start a TikTok a while ago. I don't want people to find it because I had a very, very different TikTok back then. I was doing comedy sketches about 10 years ago. So don't go and look on TikTok for me. But yeah, no, there's nothing at the moment. I'm sure that'll come further when I've got time to actually set up and start recording again. But
well, look, Joseph, thank you so much. I'm really, really grateful. This means a lot to me as I'm trying to start out this new thing and try and just say the things that people aren't willing to say, to talk about the things, as you said, that we have to say. And maybe I should start embracing a bit more of that pissed offness instead of just my Matthew rants. Look, thank you so much. Thank you to everyone who's watching. If anyone's watching, get involved in the comments below. Have your say. Make your voice heard. That's what we've got to do. This is Matthew's Blueprint for Britain. Get involved. From me and Joseph, goodbye, ta-ra. Don't forget your poppy, David Whammy. Don't forget it.